Pioneer Knowledge Services welcomes you to the next Because You Need to Know. I'm your host, Edwin K. Morris. I serve as president and founder of this organization, and we are thrilled to offer this educational program. These design conversations bring you people's experiences from all over the globe in the field of knowledge management, nonprofit work, and innovation. If your company or organization would like to help us continue this mission and sponsor one of our shows, email byntk@pioneer-ks.org.
Hi, my name is Dr. Rachel Teague. I live just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire, about an hour north of Boston in the heart of New England. The most interesting thing near me, location-wise, I think, would be the fact that I sit about 45 minutes from the ocean, 45 minutes from the lake region, and about an hour from Boston, Vermont, and Maine. So I can make it to pretty much anywhere in about an hour, which is fantastic to be smack dab in the middle. I work currently at Southern New Hampshire University as the Senior Knowledge Management and Training Specialist. My wife and I also own a consulting company called Disruption Learning and Technology, where we work to collaborate with businesses to help solve their problems. And I've worked in the education, training, KM space for the better part of the last 18 years in one way or the other. But I've done more of a specific KM focus for the last 5 years. I stay connected with people through conversation, my ridiculous desire to continuously learn about stuff, and through knowledge management. You know, there's a big misconception about what knowledge management is unless you work in it. So the fact that I'm able to kind of pull it into different areas into my life, whether it's professional or personal or, you know, anything else I find myself in, that's where I really like to thrive.
Where did you find your first inspiration around learning? I heard you say that you're a perpetual learner. Where did it come from?
You know, I have always been involved in education in one capacity or another. Right out of high school, I was supposed to go to college like most people of my generation were supposed to. And I had some stuff happen where my direction changed a little bit. And I did a year of AmeriCorps in a program called City Year. I did it right here in New Hampshire, though it's a national and international organization. And that really gave me some hands-on experience in classrooms working with kids that were at risk who needed some help. When I was going into college, prior to that, when I thought I was going to college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was going to be a music teacher because it seemed like the most logical way to make some money and play music. I didn't really have that passion for teaching. City Year changed that for me, and education has been a constant thread in the tapestry that, you know, is my life.
So you bring up opportunity that came out of what you didn't think was going to be an opportunity, but this opportunity to be in AmeriCorps and really set a new perspective for you. Is that a safe estimation?
Yeah, I would say that's looking back on it now. Hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah.
It was a...
All right, so let's go back before that. Who was somebody who cared about somebody learning something? Who was that first imprint for you?
My parents were super influential in wanting me to get the most out of whatever I did educationally or personally or whatever. So my dad was always quoted with saying, "I'd rather have a hard C than an easy A." So even though things, you know, they came to me pretty naturally, but there were definitely some things I had to work really hard on. And they could tell if like it was an A that I earned or an A that I coasted through.
Yes.
And my dad and my mom would actually tease at dinner. They'd be like, "Oh, you got a 93, where are the other 7 points?" You know, not in like that typical hard-nosed, like, way, but, you know, the more so the...
Being funny about it, like, oh, you really slacked on that one. Come on.
Right, yeah. So that has always instilled a huge drive in my learning. And actually, one cool thing that I got to do was, by the time I finally got to go to college, just with the way that the financial aid system works, I was 24 when I started going for my bachelor's. And it took me a while to get it, but the 10 years out of high school is when I finished my bachelor's degree, and I did it through a competency-based program. And my dad was so inspired when I graduated with my bachelor's. He said, "You know, you go for your master's, I'll go through the bachelor's at the same school, and next year we'll graduate together."
Whoa.
Yeah, sure enough. Because of the way the program was set up, being competency-based, where you prove your mastery of the material through like projects as opposed to tests and quizzes and length of time in your seat. He was actually able to finish the remaining portion of his bachelor's in the year that it took me to finish my master's degree. And then we got to walk across the stage together, which was the defining moment.
That's pretty phenomenal. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was incredible because he had retired from his job, his career of like 37 years at that point. And he didn't have to go back to school, but he went back just because it was one of those things he always wanted to do. So I would say that both of my parents, but especially my dad, really kind of drove the education bug.
Did you have a formal or informal mentor in this same framework, this perspective of continual learning?
Yeah, I mean, there have been different mentors that have come and gone over the years through different projects and different employers.
Okay.
I would say that one of the most impactful activities that I did in AmeriCorps was talking about my hypothetical board of directors. And my hypothetical board of directors could include, who do you lean on? Who would you ask for support if you could pick anybody and just bounce ideas off of? There have been two people that have remained on my hypothetical board of directors since I did AmeriCorps like 18 years ago. Other than that, sometimes, I'll channel a musician where I pull it in. That's a passion or somebody I would like to channel, or I'll pull in a leader or something. So my board of directors is, my mental board of directors is changing over the years. I would say that John Holville has been really instrumental in my KM journeys. I'm really lucky to have a fantastic manager that I work for at the university who has been instrumental in really encouraging that as well. He actually introduced me to John, and John and I have been able to do a lot since then and just took off running.
And I want to point out to everybody that I pulled this out because it, one, gives reflection to you about these sources of continuity or these sources of inspiration that continue you along your path. Not everybody has that. And I want to make a stress point here that if you don't, change your perspective and find a relationship that adds value to your aspiration. It doesn't have to be formal. I like this whole model that you just explained from AmeriCorps. This was just an exercise. It was a mental model kind of exercise.
Yeah, it was just like a professional development day. They had some activities to fill time. And it's really funny because I actually volunteer with City of New Hampshire now, where I'm doing some consulting with their core and their staff to kind of actually help with some knowledge management, but help with some team building. And I was talking to the chief of staff for City of New Hampshire. Her name's Jen, and she served alongside me as a senior core member when I was a core member. And I asked her, I was like, do you remember this activity? This happened forever ago. And she's like, I think we've done it on and off over the years. She's like, why? And I told her just how impactful it was and how I've been able to pull that into different conversations throughout the years. And it's funny because, like I said, it's almost like that dinner party question where who would you have dinner with and why?
Yeah.
It's, who do you want to ask these questions to?
Well, it's a practice, and it sets up a mental practice to consult outside of yourself. And I think that's where the key ingredient is. That everything you're talking about is that you can only keep your perspective tuned if you have this back and forth outside of yourself in order to keep some kind of equilibrium, I'll call it, of your own abilities, right? Because there's certain aspects of the human framework that it can either push you or pull you. And as long as you're in earnest, trying to become something other than what you presently are, this ability gives a really growth potential that is unlimited.
100%. Yeah. It's kind of falls into knowledge sharing, and that's something where I've really started settling into with my work over the last couple of years. I've done a lot of research on knowledge transfer and have been coined a rising expert in the field, but I also am really huge into the knowledge sharing aspect and learning from people and, sharing different ideas. And that really falls into that as well, being able to kind of look at different perspectives, but also leverage the people around you, leverage information and learning. In some of the classes that I teach, both the university and, outside in workshops, one of the biggest things that I bring up is, I love teaching, and I am somebody who is an expert in these areas, a subject matter expert, but I still learn something from everybody in this class whenever I'm teaching. And that's, if I'm not learning while I'm teaching, then in my opinion, I'm not doing it right.
That just triggered something in my mind as an old Army guy that is used to training.
Yes.
If you were ever weak in a skill set, you volunteered to be the trainer, because by doing the training, it really cemented what I kept missing and became more fluent in through practice. But what you're talking about is that the knowledge sharing in the same framework is a perspective and a personal trait. So how do you get people to identify it at that root level? This is a personal trait. This is not just something that's going to be a systems or a technology fix. It's a people issue, right?
Yeah, my brand of KM is really people-based. There's a lot to be said about systems and process and AI and all of the fun aspects. I mean, it's a holistic practice if you look at it. But for me, I thrive in the people side of things. It's funny, I sit on an IT team in my role where most of my guys have worked in help desk scenarios or things like that. And I'm the only one who hasn't, to the point where my colleagues are like, can you help me with this thing? You sit in IT. And I'm like, the only thing I can tell you about IT is, have you rebooted your computer, right? Like, I was hired to do the people side where I can connect with other people and help translate that nerd to human to make it accessible for other people. An example of that is a couple of years ago, I took what I lovingly call my gap year from the university. And I went out and I consulted for a bit on family consulting business. The product that they worked on specifically was payroll. I don't know payroll. I am somebody who enjoys getting paid properly, but I don't know anything otherwise about it. My co-consultant, he was the type of guy who, if I gave him a manual on a system, he could read it in the weekend for fun and come back and be an expert on Monday. But he could not people, to the point where they hired me and they joked that I was his translator because I could do the people side of things. I could ask, well, why do you do this specific process this way? And not come off as a robot, or not come off, like, just have that genuine concern, that genuine curiosity behind it, as opposed to well, that's not what the manual says. Well, how come you do it this way? It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And I've always been that people person.
So is there an analysis? Is there a attribute table or questionnaire or something that shows who's in the knowledge sharing environment naturally versus those that are going to need a little training? Is there any way you can discern who's in or out?
That's an interesting question. I am starting to kind of gather some informal research on that. I don't have a specific place I could point people to, but it is something that I'm starting to do that research on and trying to figure out, like, if you use different personality and EQ assessments, like, where do people fall? And what I'm noticing as a trend is that the people who can kind of balance both the systems aspect, but also understand the relational human side, is where the sharing is taking place. It's almost that sweet spot where the gap is filled, because you can have somebody who's on the people side, but have no idea how to organize things. And then you could have somebody who organizes super hardcore, but they're not so much of a people person. When you have people who can bounce between the two seamlessly, or support other colleagues who, be that bridge, that system convener, if you will, being able to kind of help connect the dots. That's what I've been finding. So the people who are either strong in one way or the other, they can share, right? Knowledge sharing does happen with those people, but how it's shared might be a little bit different.
One thing we haven't talked about, which everything you just said queued me up to, is that the element I think that is missing is the cultural piece in which people have a vested interest in the community.
Yes.
So everything you're talking about with these skill sets, I get that. But where the magic happens is somebody that cares enough to share something with you that's going to help you or shortcut an issue, or you were asked. So you're like, sure, yeah, it's like this. That helpful personality trait. What's an exercise a small organization could do similar to your model of the board of directors? Is there something that's a tool that can help organizations start to sharpen that pencil?
Culture, I think, plays a huge part in it too. Like the culture of a learning organization, or trying to, you can't effectively implement anything really without having the buy-in of your people, like from the top all the way down. So something that an organization could do, and this is going to sound really silly, but most of the stuff that I recommend can be out of the box anyway. Are you familiar with the peanut butter jelly exercise?
Tell me, please.
Okay. If I were to say, Edwin, how do you make a peanut butter sandwich? You might say, I'll take the bread, take some peanut butter, put the peanut butter on the bread, and there you go. But if you were to literally do the step by step, you say, take the bread. And I was, well, where do you get the bread?
Yeah, where is the bread? Exactly.
The drawer.
What kind of bread?
Being able to actually practice that activity and do it in pairs. And that helps with communication. That helps with.
I like that very much. You took me back to when I was trained to be an instructor at the Intelligence Center at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. As an instructor, we had to go through a training that we had to do that. Exactly what you're saying, because it's it's simplistic to say, oh, you just skip all this because everybody knows this, right? You assume there's a baseline of knowledge already versus somebody that's fresh in the block that doesn't have a clue what you're talking about, that you have to think of these iterative steps that build up to something bigger. And until you go through that process, it's amazing how little thought you give to all the parts that aren't on the surface.
For sure, yeah. I just did a knowledge transfer with a pilot that I had built at the university. When I do these retentions, I'll sit with the employee and I'll kind of shadow what they're doing, but I'll have a specific topic for an hour at a time, and talk me through this process. And then when he's like, when you have this role and you're doing this piece, the next step is this. And I was like, okay, but how do I get to that role in the first place? I didn't actually know there. And that's the beauty of my role. I'm not a subject matter expert in the areas in which I'm being taught, but I am an expert in how I can translate that into like a document or where it's stored. As silly as your people might feel, literally talking about a peanut butter sandwich, that is a huge activity that you could do to really map out, those little steps one by one, and just getting people in the common practice of no step is too small, or you could combine two steps.
What I like about that is that you could create a multimedia shell for this exercise, because as we all know, not all learners learn in the same mode as other learners.
Right.
So if you had your folks build that step by step, whatever the sequence, in audio, in video, in text, just slice it up and make different formats, gets them also to change their perspective, because it's going to sound different than you read it. It's just going to have a different flavor to the consumer.
For sure.
And I think that's another key ingredient. Going back to your knowledge sharing concept of having you care to share, and there's more to it than that. But I mean, that's the element. You could say knowledge sharing is SharePoint or Portal or distro email, a listserv. It's like, no, not really. It is kind of, but it's not as you and I are seeing knowledge sharing as human-centric, that it's more contextual. When you're translating contextual, you need definition. And that's what you're getting to. Yeah,
absolutely. And being able to do it in that multimodality, then you have, like, when I make a video or something at work, I will always have, obviously, the transcript that goes along with it so people can read it. But I've started seeing people doing bottom line up first. And what they'll do is they'll take the conclusion, put it up at the top, just so you can fly through it real quick. And then if you are interested, you can read the rest of the context that goes with it, or click the link to the video that would talk through it as well. I'm somebody, depending on what the situation is, I'm flexible in my learning. But there are times where I prefer to work by myself, but then there are times where I would love to just contribute with a larger group. Even if I am doing a solo project, I'm still not discounting other viewpoints or perspectives that I'm seeking, whether it's through research or what have you.
So here we go back to human traits. Everything you just said about having that ability, and I'm calling it an ability to flex or flux or be agile. How does a culture, here again, going back to the big org, how does the culture become that? How do you get a culture to get there?
The pandemic changed it a lot. A majority in person. I know when I was walking to the lunchroom to get my lunchbox out of the refrigerator, I would bump into people, that water cooler talk, or the, hey, do you know where I can find this folder? Or, all those little pieces are knowledge sharing. And I think people discount that. They don't necessarily consider I just asked a question. That's actually at its core knowledge sharing. When we all pivoted from, primarily in person to 100% remote, how we had to communicate had to be more intentional, and how we shared knowledge had to be more intentional, but also transparent. But it's just as easy to call them and have that 2-second conversation, because even at the beginning of the conversation or the end of the conversation, it can wind, and next thing you know, you might be talking about a different project or connecting with a different colleague that you haven't met before or anything like that. I think that the culture piece is that more people are doing knowledge sharing than they think they do. And even though silos might be formed, most of the time in my experience as a consultant and as just a practitioner, I haven't seen silos being formed for negative purposes. I've seen silos formed because you grew very quickly. Yeah. Things were changing so rapidly that departments were put into play without even the realization that two departments might be doing similar work or have similar processes. So just when you can open those conversations, you can do the networking within. It takes somebody to say, hey, can we meet for coffee for 20 minutes? It takes a little bit of that initiative. But if you have enough people who are interested in being those connectors, those operators or connector of dots, however you want to put it, I think that it can be a lot easier. I mean, you can have a formal system. You can have a repository of like, I went to a conference and this is what I learned and came back with. But you can also have I learned this one thing this weekend, thought it was really neat, and read this article. Yeah. Just conversation.
I keep hearing that if you don't care about your coworkers, it's easy not to share.
Yeah.
So if we go back to that community basis, I think the key element is you have to have a communal understanding and perspective of that we're working together. I see this in some colleges, universities, where schools get built and then it's like, they don't talk to anybody else.
Right.
Same in the military. You got different command structures. They separate. They don't talk to each other and they don't want to. The idea of purposely giving intent for character building, and I'm calling it character building because it is a personal attribute.
Sure.
And it goes back to your exercise, that you have to have some practicum. You have to have some workshops. So you have to have something in which starts building this relationship and relational contextual knowledge.
Sure. And I think in some ways that's how the pandemic has helped. Academia is just weird anyway, speaking as somebody who works in academia. But I know for me, the way our university is structured, we have a global campus, which is largely online. And that's where a bulk of our students come from. We do have a physical campus, which is something that surprises people, where we have a lot of the kids out of high school that go right to college and have that traditional college experience with sports teams and dorms, right? It's very much a thing here. So we have those students. And then we have all of the faculty and staff and administrators and all of those who support everybody. So we have this one university model. It's interesting. There's a little bit of a push-pull because people forget that even though you're a student on campus, you're also part of that global community that we have as well. And the same goes with the staff. No, I only work on campus. Well, actually, you work at this global institution, so why not have these conversations and share a little bit broadly? And people have been largely positive with that. And like I said, the pandemic, I think, has helped because we've had to be intentional, but different working groups and communities have been formed because it kind of almost like reset the playing field where everybody was remote. So now that everybody's remote, let's have these conversations, see where we're at and start sharing. And it's been slow and steady, but I've definitely seen more openness, not just at the university, elsewhere too.
So with this background of being in an academic framework, do you see a certain type of people, class of people, a region of people, a color of people? Do you see anything in a general sense that says, oh, these folks over here, they get this whole sharing thing? Is there folks that are more able to do this naturally?
I'm thinking from where I am sitting, our university doesn't have a tried and true knowledge strategy. We don't have a chief knowledge officer. We don't have the formalized strategy game plan. Our movement was founded grassroots. We have a knowledge team that works in IT, and then we have a knowledge team that works supporting the folks who support the students. They're called student experience. And we bridge together and we work well, but we have these two separate teams where actually the student experience team falls under learning and development technically, right? So you have the learning and development team and the IT team, and we cross paths and we help. But I think that watching the natural progression in the planting the seeds, we held a community of practice where anybody who was interested in just knowledge sharing in general could come, and our numbers have slowly built over the years. This year we've been kind of in this remission state where we've been kind of like trying to figure out where are we going to go, how are we going to move forward with this. It was truly grassroots to the point where now if knowledge management or knowledge sharing have been brought up, my team has been seen as the experts. And then we're getting outreach from different departments of like, hey, have you met Rachel? She does knowledge management. And I'm all over the place throughout the university helping out because we've built this reputation from a grassroots movement moving upward.
Well, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
There's nothing better than having success follow you after an effort has been put forth. And what you're talking about is kind of a covert way to get an organization to find value
For sure.
in knowledge management or knowledge sharing. And that's a brilliant concept.
Yeah.
And so can you give us the first thing you would do different now that you've done this and now you've started to pick up some interest and success? What would you have done different starting this if you had to start it all over again?
I have to give props to my director, Tim Bilbrough. He was the one who really started this from just a basic conversation at lunch in a conference room one day to bringing it to be like a full-fledged governance, because now we have a governance that comes along with it. So Tim, I think too, if you were to ask him, he would say that, well, he wouldn't say this, but this is the analogy I'll use. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? If you think about the long game of where you're going and knowing that, you know, the seeds you plant are going to pay off in the long run, that's the way to look at it in one perspective. Now, if we could do it differently, obviously we had a business case drawn up. We were able to present it to certain members and get stakeholder buy-in before we brought it up to the higher levels of the university. And I think that I wish that we could have really pushed forth the idea of knowledge management sooner, but I think it kind of ran the way it needed to in our case here. For me, if I were to go to an organization who wants to start knowledge management and kind of go from there, I would probably start with talking to the people to figure out, what do you want to know? How do you want to know it?
Yes.
And then figuring it out from there. The very first piece is just, you know, working with the people. And that's one thing that we did incredibly well. Our community of practice, whenever we have meetings, and I know the tried and true community of practice, there's no one facilitator, but unfortunately how it works in our organization is we have to have the facilitators or nothing gets done. Somebody has to schedule the meeting. We have always thrown it back to the community. What do you want to learn and how can we help support your interests with a knowledge management context?
You don't come with a prescription, you come with questions, right?
Right.
You try to get the pulse of what the people are hungry for even before you serve dinner. I think that's the big key thing to take away from all of this, is that if you don't go to the people first and understand their pain points and perceptions and all those things to really clearly understand what's going to stick, you got to go with what's going to stick first. So you can't just come in with a enterprise level, boom, 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 and then it's like, you guys never even talked to us, you know?
Right.
So
There's nothing worse than having leadership or whoever play chess with you, right? Like if you're the one who's actually doing the work, not to say that you can't have some ideas, but I would rather, from a change management perspective alone, you need to incorporate the people to get the buy-in, but also if you're going to have this massive change happen, you're going to work against yourself if you don't incorporate the folks who are doing the work.
Oh, yes. It's much easier for somebody to, it's that attraction to want to be there in conjunction with whatever the solution is being rolled out. But if you have a vacuum, it doesn't matter what the solution is. If the vacuum doesn't want it, it results in a vapor lock, complete stoppage.
That's so true. That's where the people side comes in incredibly well. Because, you know, if I were to start by saying, well, I hear this is what the leadership wants, but how does that fit into what you want? Or how do you trickle up to that? And when people are honest and you can build that rapport, it's amazing what you can get accomplished on both sides.
Well, in that, let me hear what Rachel's definition of KM is.
Oh, my definition of KM is fairly fluid. It involves knowledge sharing. It involves being able to see things from a different vantage point and being able to document in whatever way makes sense for the system at hand or the issue at hand. Having it be a people-focused approach where you can access the information that you want or need at the right time in a way that is organized and being able to share it out. No knowledge management strategy is going to be exactly the same for every organization that you touch or every knowledge manager. You're going to have some people that are more systems focused. You're going to have some people process like specific, but at the crux of it, you need to have the people buying in. It comes down to how people get information in a way that makes sense for them.
Really, it sums up for me as a synthesis ability. It is a synthesis of organizational knowledge. And so I got to ask this next question, which I didn't think I was going to do, but is knowledge an asset or a resource?
Oh, that's a good question too. It depends on how you look at it, right? Whatever perspective you pull. So I think in many ways, knowledge is a resource. but having the right knowledge can make it an asset or make you an asset. So again, it's not to give you a non-answer, but that balance is an incredible chicken or the egg.
I love that answer, because what I heard is that an asset is critical knowledge that can make or break something, right? That's an asset.
Sure.
A resource. And I've always, in my mind, as an old timber guy, stewardship of the land, I've always looked at knowledge as a natural occurring resource. But when I use natural resource, I throw everybody off because that's earth stuff.
Right.
You're right. I think there is a fine line difference between the criticality to where if it's a resource, it's just available, here, have some if you want, to this is going to explode.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's great. I would agree with that too.
All right, Rachel. Well, thank you, my friend. It was a blast having you on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you for joining this extraordinary journey, and we hope the experiences gained add value to you and yours. See you next time at Because You Need to Know. If you'd like to contact us, please email byntk@pioneer-ks.org or find us on LinkedIn.